Hello, everyone. Welcome to this video where we will talk about European VAT, Value Added Tax. So in this video, you will learn what is VAT, what Amazon sellers need to do about that, when they have to register for VAT, what kind of consequences you can have if you don't comply with the European tax rules. So first, let's introduce our guest. Our guest is Alex from SimplyVAT. Could you please, Alex, introduce what you do and also what SimplyVAT is doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Alex Wyatt. I, like Augusta said, am from SimplyVAT.com, and I am the Global Projects Manager, so I'm working on all things that are impacting our sellers in the future, such as Brexit and the 2021 EU VAT reform. So happy to answer any questions for that. But as a company, we help sellers with their international taxes, spanning across Europe and Canada. So yeah, we're happy to help with registrations and ongoing compliance.
Oh, you mentioned this magic word Brexit. There are more magic words in this topic, but let's start from the beginning. If someone is watching and maybe they are looking into expanding to European marketplaces or starting to sell in Europe as a beginner Amazon seller, could you give us an overview? What is European VAT? Obviously, it's not a European VAT; it's VAT in separate countries, right? And then how does it apply to Amazon sellers from Europe and outside Europe?
Yeah, sure. So starting right from the very beginning, VAT, so it stands for value added tax, and it is a tax that is added at every step of the supply chain. So it starts at the raw materials onto the manufacturer onto the supplier onto the wholesaler onto the final customer, where the VAT will eventually be due. So it's not supposed to be a burden on VAT registered businesses. So if you are a VAT registered business, you can always reclaim or offset your VAT on your VAT return. And if we're looking at, like Augusta said, it isn't one European VAT. So it's one legislation interpreted in 28 different ways. So each country has their own way of reporting the VAT. They have their own VAT rates. They have their own VAT reduced rates, and some countries even have zero rates, and how you report on it. So it can differ between countries, multiple different languages, and can be quite complex when it comes down to the reporting obligations. When we're looking at Amazon sellers specifically, selling that in the EU, we are looking at VAT registrations typically where you are holding stock. So Amazon has their Fulfillment by Amazon program, where you can hold your stock in multiple different EU countries, depending on where you set your FBA settings. So there is the EFN network, which stands for the European Fulfillment Network, which is currently where you're shipping all your goods into the UK warehouse, and then you can sell cross-border into the other EU countries. And you can actually set this up in your Seller Central account, where you list your products on the different marketplaces, but only set your FBA settings to the EFN network selling from the UK. So this can all be managed from your Seller Central account. Then we have the Pan-EU program, which is another big one that sellers like to use, which is where you are shipping your goods into the UK fulfillment centers, and then Amazon will move your products amongst their six other EU countries, so including Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Czech Republic, and Poland, depending on their algorithm and where your products are going to be selling best. So they will move those products for you. Now, one thing I do want to touch on is that Brexit is on the horizon. So Amazon have just put out an announcement to its sellers selling in the EU that they will no longer be fulfilling cross-border between the UK and the EU. So if you are currently using the EFN network, you will no longer be able to sell cross-border to customers in the EU. You will have to look at either importing into the EU directly into a fulfillment center there, and then selling cross-border, from that fulfillment center, or you can continue just to sell in the UK to UK customers, but you will have to manage these separate supply chains after Brexit, which is coming up on December 31st of this year. For the Pan-EU program, at the moment, you can import into the UK, and then Amazon will move your goods amongst the other EU countries. Again, Amazon isn't going to move your products between the UK and the EU. So what you're going to have to do is set up two separate logistics and supply chains going into the UK and into the EU. Once your goods are in the EU and you're set up for the Pan-EU program, Amazon will continue to move them around, but you need to get them into an EU country in the first place. So this is something that you need to start preparing for and make sure that you've set up your logistics and you've factored in those extra costs associated into setting up an additional kind of supply chain into the EU.
Yeah, if this video will not answer your questions, or if you need help and assistance with VAT, you can always contact simplyvat.com and ask for their help. And let's talk a little bit about so let's say if there is a foreign non-EU business, they are selling in US marketplace and they would like to sell in European marketplace. What are the options for them to be compliant with these taxes? Do they have to register a company in EU, or how does it work?
Yeah, so you don't actually have to register a company in Europe. I think that is a big misconception. You can use your US company and trade into the EU going forward. But one thing I would note is that when you're looking at taxes, you're going to have to look at if you're going to be importing your goods into the EU, you will have to be VAT registered right from the minute that you're importing your goods into a specific EU country. So if you are thinking about moving your goods into the EU, make sure that you're preparing for these registrations in advance, because the registrations, depending on the country, can take anywhere between 4 up to 12 weeks. So it's best to think in advance for these and prepare. If you're a non-EU based business, you will have to also consider what's called fiscal representation when registering in specific EU countries, such as France, Italy, and Poland. Fiscal representatives are local representatives who are jointly and severally liable for the VAT owed by a non-EU based company. So these fiscal representatives take on the extra risk. And with that being said, they may charge extra fees and or bank guarantees. It depends on which fiscal representative that you use. So it's something to factor into the equation when you are when you're choosing which country you want to import into directly. So some of the best countries to do that to avoid the fiscal representation would be the UK and Germany.
Fiscal representation means that you cannot do it yourself, taxes in France, Italy, and Poland. Is it correct?
Yeah. You need someone there that's based in that local country that is going to be jointly liable. It's pretty much so that the tax authorities, if you don't pay your tax as a non-EU business, the tax authorities have someone to go to and to get the money from. It's kind of like a local security.
And your company obviously provides this kind of services, fiscal representative.
Yeah, we work with local fiscal representatives in each of the different EU countries that require it.
All right. And it's hard for me to pronounce the name, Shwaminathan. He's asking, could you please explain more about Pan-EU program? Maybe, are you able to explain exactly what does it mean and how does it affect the taxes?
Yeah, so the Pan-EU program, you are essentially signing up to have your goods stored in 7 EU countries. You're going to be listing your products on Amazon's 5 main markets. And I actually think that now that Netherlands has been added to it, that they've added Netherlands as part of the Pan-EU program. I don't know if someone can put in the comments if I'm wrong. But what you will essentially do is have your products listed on all of those different EU sites, and you'll have access to prime shipping for each country, for each marketplace, and also you have cheaper fulfillment fees and cheaper shipping costs to the end customers. So there are a lot of benefits with that. On the flip side, for you as a seller, you need to look at your and pay attention to your tax obligations, because turning on the PAN-EU program, what seems as such a great program, and why not sign up for it? But on the flip side, you need to have 7 VAT registrations in place. So you would have the UK, France, Italy, Spain, Czech Republic, and Poland, and Germany. I think I've just missed one. And once you have all of those VAT registrations, thank you, Josh. Josh just said Netherlands is part of the PAN-EU program now. But once you have all of these VAT registrations in place, you then need to be filing ongoing VAT compliance. So you have either monthly or quarterly VAT returns. You have to be paying the local rates of VAT, which as part of the PAN-EU program vary between 19% to 23%. So you need to be accounting for the fluctuations of VAT rates in your margins, because you don't have control over your stock or where it's coming from. So Amazon could ship some of your products from Poland, for example, and be shipped to Germany, and you have to be charging Polish VAT on these sales. So you have to make sure you're accounting for the 23% VAT when it's coming from Poland.
And one question, at the time of recording, I remember that 1 or 2 weeks ago, a lot of Amazon sellers were getting emails, automatic emails from Amazon requiring to provide Austrian VAT registration, otherwise they will be suspended or something like that. Can you explain this situation? Was there an error, or what's happening?
It wasn't an error. They related it to a digital sales tax, and it wasn't necessarily, from my point of view, it didn't look like it had anything to do with the actual digital, like e-commerce sales, but more so digital services like advertising. However, Amazon did send this information out to its sellers, and I saw a few different copies. So one of them said, "We think that you do need to have a VAT registration. Please upload your registration." And another one I saw said, "If you do have a requirement, please upload your VAT registration." Now, this is in regards to, obviously, Amazon doesn't have any fulfillment centers in Austria. So this would be for people that are distance selling, which is where you're selling cross-border in the EU into Austria. So you would need to be, Austria has its own threshold of 35,000 euros before you have to be VAT registered in Austria. So if you are a seller selling cross-border into Austrian customers, which again, you don't really have much of control over where your customers are when selling through Amazon, you need to make sure that you are monitoring those thresholds. And then once you cross over the 35,000 euro threshold, you're getting VAT registered in Austria, and then any further sales going into Austria are then accounting for the Austrian local VAT rate. So if you do have that obligation, make sure you're checking it out. And just a big note on that, the distance selling thresholds are calculated net of VAT, so exclusive of VAT. So if you are doing your own calculations, just take that into consideration.
Right. Let's talk about the consequences when you don't comply with VAT rules. I know that European countries are very sensitive to VAT, abuse, or not abuse, but when, let's say, you try to avoid or you are delaying paying taxes, you get a lot of big fines. Do you know any Amazon sellers who really had trouble with this because they registered too late, or I don't know, some other scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. The first off, over the last 3 years, the tax authorities have really started to clamp down on marketplaces because there has been a load of VAT fraud happening. It's estimated to be about 7 billion euros per year that the tax authorities are losing to uncompliant e-commerce sellers specifically. So that's a huge amount of revenue that they are losing, and therefore they want to, they're putting different obligations in place for marketplaces to make them liable so that they're cracking down on these sellers. One seller that came to us years ago, they received a few different letters from the tax authorities, one from the German tax authorities, one from the French, that stated that they owed 1 million euros each because they crossed over the distance selling rules and they didn't realize that they had, and they were paying the taxes to the UK government. So in that case, when we took them on board, we had to sort out all of their backdated taxes, and with that comes the additional. Not only do you have to VAT register in the local countries, file the ongoing compliance going backwards, you also have to reclaim it back from the UK tax authorities where it was paid, which the UK tax authorities didn't want to give the money back. And then on top of that, there's also late payment fines and penalties that the tax authorities will issue for being uncompliant. So, for example, in France, they issue penalties of up to 15% of the VAT owed for late payments and late filings of your VAT return. So that's just a huge chunk of money that you're just kind of throwing away if you are not taking compliance seriously.
All right, thank you. And we have a question. Are there any agencies you recommend for handling pan-EU tax? So that's why we're doing this together with Alex, and she's representing SimplyVAT company. And Orange Click or myself, I recommended this company for a few years just because there are some other players in the industry, but I don't know. I talk to a lot of Amazon sellers, and whenever I hear bad stories with tax agencies like SimplyVAT, I of course discredit those companies. But with SimplyVAT, I never really had. I didn't hear bad experiences, so it's good to SimplyVAT. So yeah, this video is biased, of course. All right. Let's see if we have another question. We have another question. Robert is asking, does a US seller that would sell in Europe and have products shipped directly to EU have to pay taxes on product upon arrival and one product is sold?
Okay, so yeah, if you are not using the FBA settings or program here in Europe and you're sending directly from outside of the EU, sending directly to customers in the EU, then that's where things kind of start to change. So that is where you are going to decide who is the importer of record. And the importer of record is the person who is going to be obligated to pay any import VAT and duties when the goods are being imported into the EU. So you can choose that it's either going to be the customer or it's going to be you as the seller. And if it's you as the seller, then you need to be VAT registered, and then you can reclaim any of your import taxes. If you're making the customer the importer of record, that's absolutely fine, but I really highly suggest that you are making it explicitly clear at checkout that the customer is going to be having to pay the extra additional taxes when the goods are coming into the UK. Otherwise, you could be facing as a seller extra returns because customers might not want to pay the extra duties once it gets stuck at customs. And also there's going to be those additional delays when the goods are coming into the EU. So it's just something to consider. But one other thing, if we think about Brexit coming up, the UK tax authorities have recently just kind of changed the game a bit for sellers in regards to a post-Brexit scenario if you're sending goods from outside of the UK. So before, we had the low-value consignment relief threshold, which meant that any goods with a value of less than £15 could be shipped into the UK directly to private customers without any VAT. After Brexit, every single item coming into the UK will be charged with tax. So there will be no longer a low-value consignment relief threshold. So how they're going to implement this is any value or any goods or consignments with a value of less than £135, they are going to be charged at tax is going to be charged at the point of sale. If you're selling through a marketplace, the marketplace is going to be collecting this for you at the point of sale. So no matter if you're a UK business or non-UK business, marketplaces are going to be collecting the tax for you at the point of sale after Brexit. Specifically just in the UK. And if your goods are valued with a consignment value of less than £135, they will collect the VAT, and then your goods should be able to go through customs as long as you attach the invoice for the goods on the parcel that you're shipping in. So that's a huge change that's happening. Everything is going to be charged at the point of sale. If you're selling on your own website, then you will need to also charge this at the point of sale from the first sale. There's no threshold to exceed. You need to be VAT registered yourself here in the UK to make sure that you are accounting for the taxes to those customers, and then your goods are being imported in directly to the private customer. Nothing's going to be paid at the customs border coming into the UK after Brexit, and it's going to be paid at the point of sale. Yeah.
And let's say, so yeah, you touched now a scenario where US seller is selling, let's say, on Amazon and ships directly to the consumer. And you said that seller can choose either they pay the VAT in advance. In that case, they need to be registered. Let's say if German customer buys product and seller ships, and then US
And the seller, yeah.
has,
If the seller wants to be the importer of record, then they, yeah, and they're a German customer is buying EU slightly different than what the UK is putting into place. So you would have to be VAT registered in Germany in order to account for the taxes.
But if US seller decides to ship 1,000 units into warehouse of Amazon, then they register, let's say, for German VAT, shipped to German warehouse, and then they will have some import taxes to pay, right?
Yeah, as soon as you're moving your own stock into a fulfillment center or into a country, a warehouse, anywhere in Europe, you then have to be VAT registered right from the get-go. There's no threshold to exceed. You need to register right away. And I would register before you get the VAT, or before you import your goods into the country, so that you can make sure that you can reclaim your import VAT. You'll get an EORI number. It stands for Economic Operator Registration and Identification number, and that EORI number will be linked to your business, and you will be putting that on your import documents in box 8. And what that will do is that will identify your business as the importer and allow you to reclaim the import VAT on your VAT return. So without putting your import number on the the SAD documents or the import documents, there's no way of associating your business to that import that you actually paid the taxes, so you wouldn't be able to reclaim anything. So that's super important.
All right. We have a lot of questions, and another one. Do you recommend any bank to set up business-to-business euro payments for the French VAT?
Yeah, so I've heard on the grapevine that that Payoneer has been able to offer the SEPA direct debit, the SEPA B2B direct debit. So for those of you who don't know, the SEPA B2B direct debit is if you are VAT registered in France. France requires all of their VAT payments to be made via direct debit through the SEPA B2B direct debit program. And so what happens is when, say, as an agent, we would file your return and request for the payment to be made, and your account would already be set up with the SEPA B2B direct debit, and the money would just automatically come out of your account once we instruct for payment, and the French tax authorities would receive the funds into their accounts. So it has been a big problem for especially UK businesses. In the past, they haven't been able to get a SEPA B2B direct debit. UK banks haven't offered this unless you're selling over a huge threshold. So I don't know, and now I'm seeing that next year Payoneer. no, it's for next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, in regards to the banks, I don't have a better option for you, unfortunately. You can continue paying through your local bank, but it would just mean that you would then be paying 65 euros penalty. And actually, there is one other option, but you'd be paying 50 euros. I have one other option if you want to reach out, but it would cost you 50 euros a month, which is slightly cheaper. So I'm not sure if you'd want to take that option. But yeah, if you do want that option, just send me a message on LinkedIn or through email, and I can help you out.
And actually, talking about the banks, take a look at TransferWise. You will also find the links below. We'll put in the description. TransferWise is a very good solution for having bank accounts with different currencies, and you can have euro bank account and also TransferWise for euro accounts. They have a direct debit. So you could, of course, reach out to TransferWise to ask if it will work with French authorities, but I think it could work. And TransferWise can open accounts for many country companies. I don't know if it's for Indian company applies as well, if they would open, but I hope so. All right, let's see. We have a question from Tom. Tom says, thanks for having this webinar. And is VAT that I need to pay should be calculated from the total listing price or from the amount that Amazon pays transfers to you?
This is a good question. It should be paid on the total listing price. So the price that you list on Amazon, especially for those of you who are U.S. sellers or are not based in Europe, you might not be used to how we Europeans, I say we, I'm not European, but how we charge taxes. So tax is actually included in the price listed that you see on any website. It's not added on checkout like it is in the United States or in Canada. So this is super important to note so that you can make sure that you are adding in the VAT into the price listed on Amazon, and it will be calculated on that total sale price. So whatever you're setting as the as your net price, you would add on the VAT to make it the gross price, and you have to account for Amazon's fees in there, any shipping fees, all of that is calculated. VAT is calculated on top of.
The question, the same listener is asking if seller from India, probably company from India, do they need VAT before selling in EU, and can they start selling and then apply for VAT numbers? So we already answered, or Alex already answered earlier, that you need to apply for VAT registration before you ship any goods. And of course, this question applies to any kind of outside Europe company.
Yeah, well, my onboarding team has told me that if you are trying to VAT register in the likes of the UK or Germany at the moment, they have put in extra restrictions for non-local businesses where they are asking for proof of trading. So what we've been doing is sending over screenshots of your accounts that you've opened. So you do need to set up an account before getting registered, so that we can have proof that you are trading in those local countries. But otherwise, yeah, I would highly suggest getting your VAT registrations in place before shipping your goods in. So it would be open your account, get your VAT registration in place. Whilst that's happening, make sure you're getting all of your products, imported or getting them manufactured together. And as soon as you get the number, then you can import your goods into the fulfillment centers.
It's a nightmare. Yeah, all the taxes are a nightmare probably. That's why you can contact SimplyVAT and they will probably help you with your nightmares. All right, so let's look at the next question. It's from Nuno Rodriguez. At SimplyVAT, do you assign a specific person to a client? I mean, is it always the same person dealing with the client, or are they based in EU for EU customers?
Yeah, so you are assigned one point of contact. You get a client manager. We do have a client manager assistant that would be able to assist each of the client managers, should somebody be away on holiday. But you do have one main focal point that's looking after your account. Everyone in our company is based in the EU, so they're kind of based and dotted around in different EU countries, mainly here in the UK. But yeah, we are flexible and we can help on various different time zones as well.
All right, let's talk about VAT invoices. Very often, Amazon sellers are asking, or especially non-EU Amazon sellers who are not dealing with VAT in other daily lives. So they say, I see very often in Facebook groups and other forums, they are saying, oh, German customer asked for VAT invoice. By the way, Germans like very much these invoices. Everything is a paperwork. How I joke, whatever sound you make, you have to document and send a letter to them. So basically, yeah, German customer asks for VAT invoice, and maybe that seller didn't set up any kind of system. And I heard that Amazon is providing some kind of VAT invoice service. Can you comment on that, Alex?
Yeah. So the Amazon VAT I think they call it the VAT calculation service, and that is where they create invoices on your behalf. So some EU countries do require invoices for B2C. Some don't require it. And also, if you're selling to VAT registered businesses, those businesses, if they want to reclaim any of their purchase VAT that they paid to you, on their VAT return, they would need a VAT invoice. So I think Amazon established this VAT calculation service where they create the invoices on your behalf. They created it specifically for the Amazon business accounts that they've recently set up. And this would, what it means is that you would be able to send an invoice with the customer's VAT number and your VAT number, and hopefully the VAT would be charged correctly, so that if it's the same VAT number, they would either be the domestic reverse charge. If it's cross-border, it could be done under the reverse charge, or if it's the same VAT number and they don't have the domestic reverse charge, it would be charged as normal, and the VAT can be reclaimed on the VAT return. I know that some of the invoices have been in the past a bit not the most consistent, or if they are consistent, not technically correct. But if you are looking for an option, then yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say use the invoicing service that they're offering. But if you have no other options to create invoices for your customers, then that would be, and the business sector is a huge customer base for you, then I would absolutely say, use that, use the invoicing for your tax invoices for the business to get to your business customers. But yeah, that tax calculation service is different from the Amazon VAT services. So they do offer VAT services, but they're completely separate from the VAT calculation service, which is just invoices.
And what about if, let's say, I have a Microsoft Word template, and whenever someone asks for invoice, I ask my virtual assistant to create this invoice. Is it legal? Is it okay?
Technically, yes. You can generate your invoices however you'd like. There are, specific requirements for invoices. They need to be sequential. They need to have your company information. They need to be, if you have your VAT number or the customer's VAT number, and charging the correct VAT rates, and showing this on the invoice. If you are, doing a reverse charge, using the reverse charge mechanism, you need to have the obligatory phrase on these invoices. But if you have all the systems set up in place for your VA to do it, then absolutely, I would say there shouldn't be a problem creating it in Word. I would just make sure that that your invoices are being correctly completed.
Obviously, each country has its own invoice writing requirements, but let's say It's a seller who ships everything to German warehouse. They don't want pan EU. They ship everything to German warehouses and then use EFN network to, let's say, if someone is selling from Spain, they ship the goods and Spanish customer is asking for a VAT invoice. So now, according to which country's requirements, I have to issue invoice according to German, where good was shipped from, or according to Spain, where it was bought.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, so VAT is, well, under the current rules, VAT is charged based on the sale departure country until you've reached set distance selling thresholds. So, yeah, you should be charging in that scenario German VAT to the customers in Spain up until you've reached the distance selling threshold in Spain, which is 35,000 euros net of VAT. So you have that buffer room. Once you've crossed over the distance selling rule or the distance selling threshold in that country, then you will VAT register in Spain. And then any goods coming from Germany into Spain after you VAT registered because you crossed the threshold will be charged with the Spanish VAT rate and no longer the German VAT. So there's no double taxation happening. You will just be charging it based on the sale arrival country once those thresholds being exceeded.
Right. So when the sale happens, you check which VAT are you collecting, for which country you will be paying VAT. So according to that country's, it's complicated. It's a nightmare. All right, let's see. We have more questions. Do you offer customs clearance services for foreign importers of record?
We don't specifically, but I can recommend you to a few different ones. So if you, I don't have them on the top of my head, but I can definitely, if you send me a message, I can introduce you. Not a problem.
The question, what VAT tax is going to where? So maybe you can explain a little bit. Let's say we have 5 marketplaces in Europe, and what are the tax rates there?
Yeah, so if we start with the UK, and we look at standard rates for the most part. So some countries will have reduced rated items, and that will just depend on what products you're selling. And the big thing to know as well is that just because your products might be reduced rated in the UK, they might not be reduced rated in all of the other EU countries. Like I said earlier, each country kind of interprets the rules in their own ways. So you'd have to make sure that if you are selling, say, for example, baby products in the UK, which are 0 rated, then if you move them into a warehouse to be fulfilled from Germany, they're going to be standard rated from that point. So you need to make sure you're accounting for the different rates of VAT in those, from those sales coming from Germany. Now I've kind of lost where what percent of VAT? Yeah, so so that's the UK. In Germany, sorry, in Germany we have 19% standard rated. Italy, it is 22%. Spain is 21%. And France is 20%. If your goods, again, are being held in the Pan-EU program, your goods are going to be stored in Czech Republic and Poland. Czech Republic has 21% VAT and Poland has 23% VAT. So again, you need to make sure that if you're setting your prices in Amazon through the Pan-EU program, your goods could be being shipped from Poland, for example. You don't have control over that, and based on the sale departure country rules, you would need to be charging Polish VAT on those products being sent from Poland. So make sure that you are accounting for the fluctuations in VAT depending on where your products are being stored and being distributed from.
And yes, German tax is 19%, but in second half of 2020, I think it was reduced to 16.
Yeah, so this was down specifically to COVID-19. And so specific tax authorities have put out stimulus packages for businesses to try and to restart the economy, really. So they've dropped some of the VAT rates. So in Germany, it went from 19% standard rated to 16% standard rate, or standard rated, from July 1st up until December 31st of this year. But it is really key to note that it's only a temporary measure, so that if you have reduced your VAT rates down to 16% for the time being, then you need to make sure after December 31st you bump back up. And then the same thing with Ireland. They're changing their VAT rates temporarily from September 1st until the end of February, and that is going to be going from 23% down to 21%. So if you are VAT registered in those countries, you can take advantage of that at the moment.
Talking about Amazon VAT services, I heard only bad experiences, and I think some sellers were really attracted to this offer because Amazon, I think, was offering like free service for 1 year, and then later it's a normal rate for the service. But I heard a lot of stories where people were not able, as this listener says, were not able to reach out to support, and they didn't know whom to reach out. And I think Amazon was doing this in cooperation with Avalara, and later I think they were publishing 3 or 4 other partners. I don't know, maybe it improved after they expanded their partnership network. But do you get, Alex, sellers coming from Amazon's VAT service to your company?
Yeah, all the time. I think the moral of the story with the Amazon VAT service is you kind of get what you pay for. If you're getting a free service, you kind of should expect not to really hear, or maybe not to get the correct information, or maybe to miss a return. I don't know, but you kind of get what you pay for if you're not paying anything. So that's something to be aware about. But we definitely have had clients come over, and it's mainly down to, a lot of, like that listener said, it's down to the communication, and also, if people should have been, the VAT registrations have been taking a long time, through that service. So it is getting people VAT registered and maybe even backdating their returns to the time that they first started selling, because maybe they VAT registered late. I don't think Amazon's VAT calculator or VAT services can actually support backdated returns. So that's something to be aware of as well.
If you want a full partner for VAT services, go to, what's the name of your company?
SimplyVAT.com.
SimplyVAT, but it's not simply. It's not really simple.
I tried my best.
We have a question from Vyacheslav, which I asked to clarify, but I'm not getting clarification. How many times VAT can be added?
Well, it should only be charged once. So, yeah, you should only make sure that you're charging it or collecting it once. And then essentially what you're doing is you're collecting it from the end customer and you're paying it to the tax authorities. You're essentially collecting it on behalf of the tax authorities and the governments in those local countries. So yeah, you should only be charging it once. So if monitor those distance selling thresholds, make sure you're charging based on the sale departure country until you reach the distance selling thresholds. Then you switch over to the sale arrival country.
Distance selling thresholds were mentioned several times in the last half an hour. So Google and check what is it exactly. It's worth to know, because if you're a big seller, you might be hitting these thresholds probably very soon.
Especially for the Austrian one, yeah.
Yeah, and we have again about the Amazon VAT service to be careful. I would also say be careful. Don't get on this, what's the name, bite? No, not a bite. Bait. And yeah, use agency like SimplyVAT or other, if you want, which are specializing in this and work only with e-commerce sellers and doing this every day. We have questions. Yeah.
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, it comes down to your business. These, Amazon isn't going to be taking on the compliance, nor is Avalara. They don't take it on. They're not the ones being written up in the black books from the tax authorities. It's going to be your business at the end of the day. So you need to take it very, very seriously and make sure that you are taking and grabbing a hold of your VAT compliance, factoring in the cost of compliance, like a VAT service provider, into your overheads in general, and in forecasting that, because it is a cost to your business, but you would rather have a cost to your business than having to eat into your profit margins later down the line, finding out you had extra penalties or fines being thrown at you because something wasn't filed correctly in the right language, or something like that.
All right, we have a question about custom duties. Do you know what are the custom duties in those marketplaces? Probably in European marketplaces, VAT is calculated after custom duties, right? It has a compounding effect, right? Interesting, compound. Okay.
Yeah, so VAT is charged based on the cost value of the goods plus any freight and insurance. So yeah, it is kind of compounding, I guess, if you say it like that. When it comes down to customs duties, that is based on the commodity codes. So whatever your individual items are, and it's best to check this with your freight agent. They would be able to assist you with this information, but it would be down to your individual products and their commodity codes, and then off the back of that, customs duties and percentages are calculated off the back of that. So cross-check that with your freight agent, but one big thing to note is those duties are non-reclaimable. So whatever you pay for those, you can't reclaim. However, your import VAT is reclaimable if you are VAT registered in that country. So make sure you do have your VAT registrations. Otherwise, that's a huge chunk of money that you're just kind of throwing away. And yeah, hold on to the documents as proof of import, because again, you won't be able to reclaim if you do not have the proof and your EORI number is not in box 8 on your import documents. You need that proof in order to import your goods and reclaim.
Import documents have a form, and in the form there is a field number 8 where you put EORI number, right?
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah, it is. It's the consignee information, so it's just saying that you are the owner of the goods when it's being moved into the EU.
All right. The question about Singapore, where Amazon is starting to operate and they have GST tax similar to VAT. Are you helping sellers with Singapore already?
Not yet. No. I can't touch upon Singapore any GST. However, GST and VAT do have very similar principles. I don't know the specifics around Singapore, but they do follow similar principles and how they're operating. So I would assume, if you are importing goods into Singapore to be sent on to the final consumers, that you should be looking to get GST registered.
But your company is not providing the service?
No, we mainly look at Europe and Canada.
Canada, okay. All right. So question about your services. There is no information about prices on your website. Are you able to inform audience the pricing of your services?
Yeah, so our pricing is based on the country that you are VAT registering in. So if you do want to go forward, I would actually suggest you need to kind of specify which country that you are actually looking to go into, because there's different VAT filing frequencies. It's best to make sure that you're, we've charged based on a filing. So we would have to understand that information in order to go on. But for the most part, the registrations are around £325, and then the compliance is done after the fact there. And it's also based on kind of an economies of scale type model as well. So the more registrations you do, the cheaper it can get.
SimplyCats from Vet Clinic are very happy, and they say that Amazon do offer a retroactive return service, but it's not straightforward. Great webinar, and congratulations. We'll be in touch ASAP. What does mean retroactive return service?
Oh, looking backwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are not registered and you made a mistake to sell without registration, it would be all right for the authorities without fines?
not necessarily. You still might get fined off the back of it. But sometimes if you are more proactive, depending on the country, if you are more proactive and you kind of hold your hands up and say, I am owning up to this VAT that I should have paid, 6 months, a year back, then there's sometimes a bit of a leeway into getting either at least some penalties reduced or completely removed. And also, but you still have to pay that VAT in the end. So it's something you still have to pay. But depending on the tax authorities, we might be able to get it down for you.
All right, let's talk about return goods which arrive to the country where you don't have VAT number. So scenario could be, for example, you have your goods in, probably it's affecting those which are selling FBM, which are fulfilling themselves. So and I think, well, we're not sure about this, but I think that Amazon requires Amazon sellers to have a return address in the country of the customer. So let's say if you sold some good to Spanish customer and you're shipping from, I don't know, Austria, and then if Spanish customer wants to return, according to Amazon return policies, they have to return to a Spanish address. And the question is, do you need to be registered in Spain as a VAT with VAT ID? If you are not storing their goods, you just get products returned by your customers.
So if, especially if you're shipping or letting your returns go back to an Amazon fulfillment center, Amazon sometimes even though you might not have allowed them to ship goods from those fulfillment centers, they sometimes will, send goods off from those warehouses. So say you put your return address in Spain, and then the customer sends the item back to the Amazon fulfillment center in Spain, and then all of a sudden another order comes up in Spain, and Amazon just sees, oh, well, we have a product in the fulfillment center here, we may as well just ship it directly from that fulfillment center. Well, that now has triggered a VAT obligation for your business. So you now you technically have to be registered in Spain for VAT and be charging VAT on that sale. So that is where kind of problems can arise. And I have seen it arise, not necessarily in Spain, but definitely a lot in Germany, because it's kind of customary in Germany. There's a lot of returns happening for items, especially in fashion. So yeah, I've seen that happen a lot. Amazon has sent it out and triggered a VAT obligation. Now, depending on the tax authority you deal with, they might be a bit more lenient and having to get the VAT registration in place. And you might not need to file a monthly return for something like that, but maybe an annual return. But again, it depends on the tax authority you deal with, depends on where you're based. There's a lot of different kind of variables that could come up. So it's quite important to kind of try and retain as much control over your inventory as possible.
All right, let's see. We have a question. SimplyVAT fills and delivers the VAT declarations to the proper authorities as the client's representative, or the client gets it from you and then client delivers themselves to authorities.
No, we would send directly to the tax authorities. So what happens is we gather your sales data directly from the sales channels like Amazon or eBay or Shopify, whatever sales channel you are you're selling through. We capture that information. We base the calculations from the transactions that have occurred in that period, whether that's a quarter or a month or a year, whatever the time period is for that specific country we're filing in. We'll make a calculation. And then you, as the seller, will have to pay the VAT directly to the tax authority. We'll give you that information on the bank details that you need to pay to. But we would then submit to the tax authorities once you're happy with the return. So we would give you all the information you need to pay, but then we submit to the tax authorities and liaise with them should there be any additional issues that you might need. We'll talk to them in their individual specific languages.
All right, one of the last questions. Did you say that after breakfast, after breakfast, Amazon will be collecting Amazon will be collecting VAT from customers when they buy a product? If yes, will Amazon be paying VAT to the authorities on behalf of the seller?
Yes, this is a good one. Thanks for picking it up. So the marketplaces have, okay, so HMRC has made marketplaces liable for a few things. One is for both UK and non-UK sellers importing goods directly to private customers with a value of goods of less than £135. If you are a seller and you are currently holding your stock in the UK warehouses, and this is not including UK businesses, but if you're based outside the UK, you've moved your stock into a warehouse in the UK and you're selling to UK customers, with the Amazon is also going to be charging VAT at the point of sale on your behalf. And what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be making a VAT exempt sale to Amazon. So you as a seller, you still need a VAT registration if you're holding your goods in a warehouse in the UK. And what will happen is you can reclaim your import VAT on your VAT return, and you're going to be putting in your VAT return, your total sales to Amazon, but it will be a VAT exempt sale to Amazon. So you're not collecting any taxes, and Amazon is actually going to be collecting that on your behalf from the final customer. Now, the big thing to note about this is that HMRC has brought this out just at the tail end of last month. So none of the marketplaces have actually had a chance to digest this information and put it out to the sellers about how it's going to be working in practice. So when you start looking at the legislation itself, it does sound a bit confusing because the UK businesses were excluded if you're holding your own products, and that's likely because UK businesses have an £85,000 threshold until they need to VAT register here in the UK. So it is a bit difficult to say how Amazon is going to put it in practice, but we'll be seeing a lot more information come out about this over the next few months on how they will be implementing this. Is it going to be a blanket approach? Or is it going to be, if you're based outside the EU, they're going to be collecting it. If you're a UK business, they're not going to be collecting it. We'll have to wait and see how they implement it. But if you want to keep up to date, you can follow our blog on SimplyVAT.com, and we'll be posting loads of information on there. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I always post so that you can stay on top of your VAT obligations as they come up.
Finished. You touched or someone touched the Brexit, and there are also some changes in 2021 in the middle of the year. Could you very briefly give us an overview what's happening and what Amazon sellers need to know or need to change or think about plan in their business next year?
Yeah, so there is a lot to think about. So what's happening, you mentioned 2021, what's happening in July 2021 is there is a EU VAT reform happening. So everything you kind of thought you knew about VAT is going to be changing for the most part. So they're going to be changing a few things. They're in kind of a short glimpse, they're extending MOS, which is the mini one-stop shop used right now for digital services. They're extending that into what's called OS, which is the one-stop shop, which is going to be covering distance sales of goods cross-border. So if you are selling cross-border within the EU to private individuals only, you will be covered under the OS system, and that essentially means you only need one VAT registration, this OS registration, and you're going to be charging VAT based on the sale arrival country where the place of consumption actually happens, where you're using the goods, and you will be paying that to one tax authority, and the tax authorities will split up the VAT amongst themselves. So you're going to be charging local VAT rates, and then paying all of that, collecting it all, and then paying it to one tax authority. They split it up amongst themselves. How this is going to work for marketplaces, so marketplaces are taking on a bit of the responsibility as well come July 2021 for sellers, and this is going to cover two areas. Again, goods coming from outside the EU, going inside the EU with a value of less than 150 euros for both EU and non-EU businesses. They're going to be charging the VAT at point of sale. goods are going to come in and go straight directly to customers with the VAT already being paid. For goods that are already held in the EU countries, you still need local VAT registrations because you still need to reclaim any import VAT. You will still need to be documenting your EC sales list, which documents the movement of taxable supply between the different EU countries. Any intrastat declarations that you might have, you still need to be filing those. But if you're a non-EU seller, if you're based outside of the EU, you will then have to, or well, Amazon is going to take on the responsibility, or any marketplace will take on the responsibility for you. If you're an EU seller, currently in the legislation, the marketplaces are not taking on the responsibility for you. So as a EU-based seller, you still have to have your own obligations. You still have to collect the VAT yourself. So how this is going to work in practice, again, we're still unsure. The European Union only just brought out these new rules kind of early this year, and they were actually delayed due to COVID-19. So how they're going to work in practice is still going to come about from the marketplaces. And you cannot just avoid your paying any taxes until July 2021. Your obligations do not go away. So make sure you still keep paying now if you have to pay now.
Oh, amazing webinar, someone says. It's so
Thank
much
you.
information. Who is amazing here, me or you? Or
Definitely you.
All right. So people are happy. Great insights. Thank you very much. That's it. Oh, a smile. And of course, if you need help with the European tax, just get in touch with simplyvat.com. They will be happy to help you and answer your questions. And thank you very much, Alex. How can people get in touch with you personally, or it's best when they go through the website?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My full name is Alexandra Wyatt. Just send me a request and say that you heard from me through the Orange Click webinar. But yeah, otherwise, you can email me at alex.wyatt@simplyvat.com if you have any other questions. Or if you go to any one of my awesome team members, they will be able to assist as well. But yeah, ultimately, we're kind of here to help. So make sure you ask your questions. Don't fall, behind in your compliance obligations, because they don't go away. You can't hide from them.
So people are happy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. And bye-bye. Good luck in your business. Ciao.
Thank you.